Let's pick up where we left off with our environmental concerns. Also, I passed back the quiz. Make sure you study those 4 tactics. That will be an essay question, and we're going to be referring to them, especially during the global warming lecture. Okay, so environmental concerns today as a review. Are they real? Yes. Are there problems? Yes. But 2 ideas involved with that is the fact that most of them are local problems with local solutions, and also the fact that they're not really global in scale. Maybe an exception to that would be some kinds of air pollution and so forth that might be spread to more ecosystems and spread to more countries, but basically they're not global, they're more local in scale. The second idea with are environmental issues real is the fact that they are blown out of proportion. Yes, there are problems, but many times they're not global or they're blown out of proportion. They're made much more extreme and of more concern than they really are. So the true picture would be that environmental concerns are specific to ecosystems, not global. They're local problems with local solutions. And the other thing is they are not to the extent sensationalized, and that's an important word. They are sensationalized by the news media and by entertainment, and of course education following right along. Another idea with environmental concerns is that we don't need drastic intervention. Okay, so I want you to have that idea. Environmental concerns and issues are going to come and go. Remember, we use the phrase the scare of the day. So you need to have an overall idea of what you think and what you should be looking for when you're looking at environmental issues. The other idea is that we don't need to do anything drastic. We already have enough regulation. There's no need for drastic government intervention. And another idea that I want you to know is that the earth is a lot more resilient than environmentalists give credit for. They deny the creator, they deny the design, and so they're just expecting everything to fall apart. When God has designed the earth to be able to handle the occupation of man, right? And your environmentalists who have swung way over into pantheism view man as a pollutant or an infection on the earth. So are environmental concerns real? Yes. Are there problems in the environment? Yes. Well, man's corrupt, fall of man, and so forth. All of creation is corrupt. But it is not to the extent sensationalized by the news media. And it doesn't require drastic government intervention. And the earth is much more resilient than we give it credit for. So we did talk about on Monday, I gave you a whole bunch of different environmental concerns. I gave you a list of 15, I gave you another list of 10. That's because there's all kinds of different issues out there that you can get on the bandwagon with. The 3 that we're going to discuss is pollution, which we did already, and resource depletion. And the 3rd that we're going to begin with today is species extinction. What is species extinction? It is the disappearance or dying out of a particular breed of plant, animal, or other organism. So we're talking about species. Species is the smallest biological category of living things. If you remember from high school biology, you had learned kingdom. Kingdoms are divided into phylums, classes, order, family, genus, species. So individual animals are named by their genus and their species. So when we're talking about species, we're talking about millions of different species. All right, and as we mentioned before, we don't even know how many species there are on the planet, especially when we're talking about insects and plants. So species extinction is the disappearance or dying out of a particular breed. That's what a species is, a particular breed of plant, animal, or other organism. It's very specific, and each species has its own scientific name. dealing with different countries and different cultures. You could call the same species many different things. So they're named by their genus name and their species. Species is the smallest biological category. So species extinction is the disappearance or dying out of a particular breed of plant, animal, or other organism. All right, with species extinction, we have an environmental bias, and then we have a proper view or a biblical view, which I hope would be your view. The environmental bias on species extinction, first of all, is based completely on evolutionary assumption. I mentioned this on Monday, the reference to the fact that we are now on the brink of a sixth extinction, as in a massive extinction of many different species. Do you remember the fifth extinction? What was the fifth extinction according to evolutionists? How many millions of years ago was it? How did it happen? It's famous. Yes? The dinosaurs, 65 million years ago by an asteroid impact, was the fifth extinction. So this sixth extinction and this environmental crisis of extinction is based on what? Evolutionary assumption. Okay, so according to our environmentalist, I might as well say evolutionary bias because it's the same thing, but according to our environmentalist bias, which is based on evolutionary assumption, the Earth stands on the brink of its sixth mass extinction, and the fault is ours. That's a quote, by the way. I don't believe that. The Earth stands on the brink of its sixth mass extinction, and the fault is ours. So what is the environmental bias with species extinction? That we're on a brink of this mass extinction, and it's our fault. Two ideas, okay? According to environmentalists, we're on the brink of this mass extinction parallel to the fifth extinction of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. And the fault is ours. Okay? So our environmentalist bias is completely based on evolutionary assumption. It is linked to the fifth mass extinction that evolutionists believe exterminated the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. But if you take a step back and think about it, it's very inconsistent. What is the whole premise of evolution? Survival of the fittest. So if an organism isn't fit to survive, it shouldn't survive. But then that's where the second part of the environmental bias comes in. Well, it's our fault. So we're pushing this extinction with the overpopulation of the human race. So our species extinction, our environmental bias is that we're on a brink of a mass extinction and the fault is ours. Not only is this based on evolutionary assumption, it's also founded on faulty statistical techniques. Remember our tactics. What are those four tactics? What are the four tactics? The first is the manipulation of fact, the exaggeration of fact, or even the fabrication of fact. That first one is they're very deceptive with their facts. And part of it is this idea of using faulty statistical techniques. I mentioned on Monday that we don't even know the total species. So how can we know how many are becoming extinct? So it's based on faulty statistical techniques. First of all, we don't know the total species on the earth, and we can't know the total number of species on the earth. There's new species being identified daily. Now, of course, they're not a big mammal or a vertebrate. They're typically a plant species or an insect species, maybe a bird species. So we can't know total species. It's faulty. So when you're looking at environmental issues, or you're looking at scientific issues, or even medical issues, you've got to look at how the statistics were done. It's very easy to manipulate statistics to get them to back up what you're trying to prove. First of all, we don't even know the total number of species. New species are being identified on a daily basis. Another problem with their statistics is that the sample is too small. A third problem with their statistical techniques is that the sample is not representative. It's not truly representative of what they're trying to say. So we don't know the total to base our calculations on. We are using too small of a sample and we're extrapolating outward mathematically instead of in reality. And the third is the sample is not representative. When they are promoting their massive sixth extinction, what kind of pictures are they showing? Are they showing, this insignificant little plant species that's barely different from another plant species? Are they showing insects? No, they're showing birds, and they're showing tigers, and they're showing, is that representative of what they're talking about when they do their numbers? No. Okay, the sample's too small, the sample's not representative. What kind of species are they talking about? They're talking about primarily insects and plants. And I also said that the sample's not truly representative. They're using species-rich environments like a tropical rainforest to run their statistics on. Are tropical rainforests representative of the entire planet? No, they're very, very species-rich compared to Canada, right? Compared to Alaska and the tundra, and especially some of the things in the subarctic zones. The tropical zones are very species rich. So is it fair to use those as representative to run statistics on? No. So on that first tactic, I want you to understand that you can mathematically manipulate statistics. You can mathematically manipulate graphs. You can, and unfortunately it is done. So as we're going through this, and as we go through global warming on Monday, I want you to keep those 4 statistics in mind. For an essay, you need to be able to explain what I mean by the tactic and illustrate it. So this is one way you can illustrate the manipulation of facts, is all the numbers that they promote when they are dealing with species extinction. And you can also illustrate the fact with which pictures do they use. Not what most of those numbers represent. So the environmental bias on species extinction, first of all, based completely on evolutionary assumption, but it's actually kind of inconsistent with evolutionary assumption. And then the second idea is that they use faulty statistical techniques. So with species extinction, next, what should our view be? What is a biblical worldview think of species extinction? All right, let's talk about this for just a minute. Do species go extinct? Yes, it's part of how nature works, okay? It's part of the fall of it's part of corruption of nature that happened at the fall. So I'm not saying species don't go extinct. Remember, are environmental concerns real? Do species go extinct? Is there pollution? Let me ask you this. Is global temperature rates, are they increasing? Right now, slightly. All right, so is the globe warming? Slightly. Okay? So it's not that we deny that the temperatures are going up a little bit. We deny how it's been sensationalized. We deny that it's to the extent that it's happening. And we deny that we need drastic governmental intervention right now. So our biblical worldview, we don't deny that there are problems in the environment, do we? And we don't deny that we need to do some things about it. Remember our tactics. We're going to manipulate, exaggerate, and even fabricate our facts. Then we're going to sensationalize the results that are going to happen due to these problems. Then we, what? Blame the wrong causes. Then we propose the wrong solutions. So I'm not saying that the climate doesn't change, am I? I'm not saying that right now maybe it is warming slightly. What I am saying is that they've manipulated the facts and misrepresented it. They're certainly sensationalizing the results of global warming. They're blaming us. And they're proposing all these radical global solutions and, coming together as a nation and reducing our carbon footprint, or even coming together with other nations, okay? So you need to have that viewpoint. So with species extinction, yes, we have an environmentalist bias that is extreme. But then our view shouldn't be extreme, should it? So with species extinction, yes, species go extinct. And yes, sometimes human activity causes a species to go extinct. But our whole point is, I hesitate to say so what, but kind of, we don't need to be concerned with saving the owl and saving the whale and so forth. But that doesn't mean we go out and wantonly slaughter and waste. And that doesn't mean we don't try to consider the impact on the environment when we are doing something industrial, or if we're building, let's say, the pipeline here or there, or whatever we're doing. That doesn't mean we don't consider the environment. It's just that we are in a culture that has shifted so much in our worldview that we think that we shouldn't ever do anything that hurts any animal or hurts any population or species. And that's simply not correct. It's a balance. So just because environmentalists are extreme doesn't mean we're going to be extreme over here either. So our biblical view of species extinction is yes, species do become extinct. And yes, sometimes we can directly cause a species to go extinct. But the main point is that it's not to the extent sensationalized by the news media, by our educational system, or by, all of the movies. They like to produce movies that have all this environmental undertone to it, okay? So it's not to the extent. And then the biblical view also includes the fact that it's part of the corruption due to the fall of man. Okay, just like when we were studying evolution, we have to explain the geological features of the earth with both creation, the flood, and even the fall of man. So a biblical worldview would be that species extinction is part of the corruption that occurred when man fell. And another part about a biblical worldview would be that the concerns of humanity outweigh the concerns of the environment. Remember, God designed the world to sustain human population. It's not like God didn't know how corrupt man would become and how it would impact the environment, is it? Okay, so that's our species extinction. So there are a lot of environmental concerns, but the three main environmental concerns are pollution, resource depletion, and species extinction. A lot of those other concerns that we listed on Monday are kind of a subset of pollution anyways, or a subset of resource depletion. Okay, so what should our view of environmental issues be? Okay, and again, it all stems on a proper view of the environment. So a proper view of the environment, which should be a biblical view of the environment, will give us a proper view of its problems. So I've got three or four ideas here that I want to talk about with a proper view of environmental problems, a proper view of those three areas of concern. And this, of course, we're going to talk about our view of it and appropriate solutions versus inappropriate solutions. Okay, so as you're forming a proper view of environmental problems, first of all, realize the tactics being used. Realize the tactics being used by the news media, by entertainment, and by public education. Be aware and realize the tactics that are being used. What are those 4 tactics? You've got to realize that these tactics are very alarmist. They're deliberately designed to frighten or motivate at least the population to agree to drastic government intervention. On the quiz I asked you, what is meant by the phrase, red is the new green? And a lot of you didn't answer that adequately. What does red refer to? Communism. Now, I realize that you weren't alive during the Cold War, so-called, and that you aren't familiar with the communist threat to the world, so maybe that's why you didn't quite understand it. So red was the old, I don't know, way to refer to communism. And how do we refer to environmentalism? Green. So red would be communism, green would be environmentalism. What was communism during the Cold War, or even prior to the Cold War? It was a threat. It was a threat to our national security, right? It was a threat to our national economy and a threat to our personal liberties, right? So what is environmentalism? It's political. It's replaced the threat of communism. Okay, and it's kind of joined with the threat of communism. That's going to be a motivation for a lot of social changes and a lot of political changes. The idea that the environment is in a crisis and we have to do something about it now. And we have to force people into taking care of the environment. How do we force people into taking care of the environment? We cut down their consumption. How do we do that? Raising prices, putting taxes. How much gasoline tax? Well, it varies from state to state. But there's a lot of gasoline tax on our price per gallon in the state of Indiana. It's probably even worse in Illinois. Okay? How else does the government force people to cut back their consumption? They can actually legislate days of the week that you're allowed to drive your car. They can legislate times of the day that you can, for example, do laundry and use up extra water. They can enforce a rolling brownout. Do you know what that is? We don't live in California. Where they actually lower the amount of electricity so that you can't do certain activities at certain times of the day. Okay? So that's what we mean by green is the new red. It's replacing communism as being our concern that, hey, this is becoming political. This is going to be used as a means to a political end. Okay? So green is the new red. Not just green is, I don't know, some of you didn't quite catch on to that. So realize the tactics being used. Realize that they are alarmist and they are political. That's why I want you to know those 4 tactics and be able to explain what I meant by those 4 tactics and be able to illustrate them so that you can have a proper view of the environment, so that you're not going to jump on an environmentalist bandwagon. Besides, we have such a more responsibility. Okay, so where should your focus be at? Serving the Lord, soul winning, not saving the environment, right? So anyway, so be aware of, realize the tactics being used. Realize that they are alarmist. Realize that they are political. And realize the means employed. How are these tactics propagated? Said it several times. News media, the liberal news media, public education, and even entertainment. It's a common theme in entertainment. So the first thing that you need to do to have a proper view of the environment's problems is to realize the tactics that are being used. Realize they are alarmist, they're blown out of proportion, they are sensationalized. Realize that they are political. Realize that many politicians can use environmentalism as a means to an end. And a lot of people will join along with them because it seems like a very good thing to do, doesn't it? And then realize the means used by environmentalists, news media, public education, and especially in science class. Every time I go to the mall and you see a science fair being displayed, what are most of the projects concerning? Chemistry, physics, environmentalism. And then, of course, entertainment. Environmentalism is often the theme in entertainment. All right, so realize the tactics being used. Second, understand appropriate solutions. Understand appropriate solutions. Remember, the key word for viewing the environment is stewardship. So we will be responsible to God in some respects for how we fulfilled the stewardship mandate. Did we take care of the environment? All right, it's way down the list, but it is biblical to take care of God's creation. So, solutions. What are appropriate solutions? First of all, we have to deal with inappropriate solutions. If we have an environmentalistic or even pantheistic worldview, what solutions do we propose? What are the wrong solutions proposed by environmentalists? Keep in mind that with environmentalism, not only do we disagree with the solutions, we also disagree with how these solutions are going to be implemented. Remember, it is political. So, what are inappropriate solutions? And as we're thinking about inappropriate solutions, we also have to think, how are they going to be implemented? How are they going to be enforced? What are the effects of these solutions on us personally? So, inappropriate solutions, not only are they inappropriate in what they are proposing to do, but they're also inappropriate on how they will be implemented or enforced. The three main solutions. Okay, there's all kinds of issues and there's all kinds of individual solutions. But basically we can split all of these solutions into three categories. First solution is to limit population. Second solution is to limit consumption. Third is to limit industry and manufacturing. So limit population. Let's talk about that first. So if you put those three, any environmentalist solution that's going to be proposed is going to be in one of those categories. All right, so limiting population. Okay, this of course comes from the fact that we have the wrong view of man, and we also have a problem with the sanctity of human life. So what is going to be one of the solutions that fit this category? Would be the promotion of abortion. Okay, so population control is directly related to abortion. I've got some news articles I want to pull out here. So remember, we're going to propose the wrong solutions and implement them in an incorrect way. Okay, so as we're talking about inappropriate solutions, not only are we going to disagree with the solution of limiting population, we're also going to disagree with how we implement it. So we're going to limit population by promoting abortion. And in some countries, even enforcing abortion. Another thing that will be done is promoting and even enforcing birth control. Okay? So not only do we disagree with where we put the sanctity of human life, we also disagree with how it would be implemented. Abortion is wrong. So it's certainly doesn't make it right because it's going to help the environment. Okay? So I've got an article here about inappropriate solutions to our environmental crisis. The title of it is Birth Control, Abortion Aren't Solutions to Environmental Crises. All right, and this, of course, has different people's opinion in it. But unfortunately, a lot of these are Catholics. But the idea is still correct. The sanctity of human life takes precedence over the environment. So we've already covered what's wrong with abortion and so forth, but it also involves on how it's going to be implemented. In some countries, China, of course, the primary example, abortion is enforced and birth control is also enforced by the government. So limiting population. Next, limiting consumption. How are we going to limit consumption? By taxation and price controls. We're going to limit consumption by price controls and taxation. All right, so we can limit this by putting price controls in place, and the idea of raising the prices. I've heard people comment, well, gasoline is, $6 or $8 over in the UK. We should be paying our fair share. What is that? Just because they have to pay more doesn't mean we should have to pay more, does it? I hear that argument frequently. Another way that we will limit consumption is by propaganda. All right, brainwashing our children to be overly environmentally conscious. We've got entertainment examples here. These are books, children's books. Okay, children's books. The Adventures of the Plastic Bottle. Actual title of book, Simon and Schuster, by Allison Inches, illustrated by Pete Whitehead. It says, a very, very happy glob of crude oil keeps a diary of his journey through the manufacturing chain. He becomes a bottle of water and then gets shredded, heated, and then recycled to be reborn as a synthetic fleece fit for an astronaut. Okay? Then we're a little less entertaining. And the next book, 101 Ways You Can Help Save the Planet Before You're 12. We're indoctrinating our children in environmentalism. This is published by Sterling, written by Joanne O'Sullivan. Save dryer lint to stuff a pillow or put it out for the birds to use for their nests. Find an eco-warrior hero. Eco-warrior hero. What's an eco-warrior? Is this an environmental extremist who is an eco-terrorist that sabotages industry? What is that? That's terrorism. Anyways. Find an eco-warrior hero. Eco-warrior hero. That phrase is kind of scary. Eco-warrior and then hero. They're not heroes. Allow yourself to be inspired. Okay. It's a lively, nicely illustrated how-to on making a difference. Okay. The Butterfly Ball and the Grasshopper Feast. This is a richly colored reissue of a 1973 British classic. Here's another one. What's So Bad About Gasoline? HarperCollins. A two-stage reader. The story of petroleum is told from a scientific standpoint. I wonder. One point is made crystal clear to kids who may need a climate change primer. We gotta indoctrinate our children on climate change. Well, it doesn't matter if they can't do math or read. Make sure they have their primer on climate change. A two-stage reader. One point is made crystal clear to kids who may need a climate change primer. Gasoline is made from petroleum. Petroleum is a fossil fuel. That's true. Once it's gone, it's gone. It'll take millions of years before the promise of more can surface. Anyway, so not only do we propose the wrong solutions, but we're going to disagree with how they will be implemented. How are we going to implement them? Price control, taxation, indoctrination. Okay? Of course, our government would be involved with the price controls and the taxation, but also indoctrination. And then the third inappropriate solution is limitations on industry and manufacturing. How is this accomplished? Regulation. We put environmental controls in place. We already have a lot of them, so we have enough anyway. But then this limits the ability of industry to spend money on research and development. If we're spending all this money being taxed by the government, we're spending all this money on unnecessary regulation and hiring people to do all these inspections and paying all these lawyers, we don't have enough money left for what industry should be doing. What should industry be doing about the environment? Paying fines? Hiring inspectors? Hiring environmental lawyers because the regulations are so complex? No, we should be investing our money in research and development. Then we can find feasible ways, efficient ways to cut down the impact on the environment. Because industry does impact the environment. It does. Not to the extent sensationalized by environmentalists, but why? So this is the idea of having a wrong solution. Okay, we want to encourage research and development, not shackle industry to the point that they can't do anything. One of the problems locally here is with over in Whiting, west of here, we have large gasoline refineries, don't we? All right, and a lot of them are using old technology because they can't afford to update. They can't afford to update because a lot of their money is tied up in environmental issues and lawyers and so forth. They also can't update and innovate because the regulations are so complex. They can't even navigate their way through all the red tape. I was looking on the internet last night to see if there's anything new I wanted to add to this lecture, and so I typed in environmental solutions, and you know what came up? Multiple companies, that their whole business involves being hired by industry to help them navigate through all the permits they would need, help them navigate through and do environmental impact studies that are required by the government. So we're so busy studying the impact that our industry is making on the environment that we don't have money and time to invest in finding ways to cut down that very impact. We're handicapping our industry, okay? So, inappropriate solutions, inappropriate implementation. We're going to limit population. How? Birth control, abortion, etc. We're going to limit consumption by price controls, taxation, and indoctrination. And then we're going to limit our industry and manufacturing by regulation, red tape. Okay? So what are appropriate solutions? If we have a biblical worldview, what are appropriate solutions? Overall, I think what we need to do as a Christian is we need to treat the environment and its resources as if it was God's. Because guess what? It is. Okay? So we need to treat the environment and our natural resources as if it was God, because it is. Or at least treat it as if it were your own and take care of it. All right? Human nature. We take care of things that belong to us, right? And we tend to not take care of things that don't belong to us, right? And we tend to care about things we have to pay for and not worry about things we don't have to pay for, right? That's our human nature. Well, that's not how we should approach the environment. It is the idea of stewardship, which involves conservation, responsibility, and even technology. Let's use the brains God gave us. So let's talk about appropriate environmental solutions. We do want to treat the environment and its resources as if it was God's, because it is God's. So I have this broken down into 3 categories as well: conservation, responsibility, and technology. Those are appropriate solutions. It, first of all, is appropriate to conserve. We shouldn't be wasteful. There's nothing wrong with water conservation. There's nothing wrong with building reservoirs and cisterns to collect rainwater and runoff. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with conserving water. We don't need to be wasteful. All right, but at the same time, I don't want to be limited by government regulation with how much water I use. So, conservation is an appropriate approach to environmental problems. Water conservation is an example. Soil conservation. Oh, crop rotation is a good example of soil conservation. Does anybody know who was the first to implement crop rotation? It's in the Bible, right? Isn't it a Bible principle in Leviticus about the different year, every so many years, and kind of like a Sabbath day idea applied to the environment? Rotating your crops, letting the land rest. That was done by God in the Bible first. Okay? So don't have the idea that conservation is bad. A forest conservation. What's wrong with replanting trees? Nothing's wrong with replanting trees. Okay? There's nothing wrong with doing things like that. Wildlife conservation. Like I said, why are we spending all this money on government taxation and government studies on how we're impacting this, that, and the other? Why don't we just start doing something more conservative about it? Okay? Not just conservative in the sense of conservation, but also conservative in the sense politically. Would be a good idea to stock rivers and have farms where we raise certain, remember how one of the environmental alarmist issues was that there's not going to be any fish left in the ocean? Well, we can do something about that. We can start raising fish farms and releasing them into the ocean, stocking things. There's things that can be done. Energy conservation. Now, I made fun of the windmills, right? And I made fun of the so-called renewable energy sources. But there's nothing wrong with energy conservation. We should be looking into different forms of energy, all right? We should be looking into renewable energy, all right? We don't want to have the extreme opposite viewpoint where we end up wasting and polluting when there are better ways to supply energy. All right, so conservation. How many have ever heard the little phrase, reduce, reuse, recycle? Is there anything wrong with that? No, as long as the government doesn't force me to do it. So conservation does include the wise use of resources, whether it's water conservation, soil conservation, forest conservation, wildlife conservation, and energy conservation. There's nothing wrong with conserving any of these resources. And then the second idea with conservation does involve reducing, so we're not wasting, reusing, so we're not wasting, recycling. That's a good idea. I think I mentioned on Monday that God is the first recycler. We have the water cycle, we have the rock cycle, we have the nitrogen cycle. What is this? This is how God naturally reuses and recycles our resources. So anything that starts with an R can be a good thing. Reduce, reuse, recycle, replant, replace. There's nothing wrong with those things. Okay? So conservation involves the wise use of resources, and it does involve not being wasteful. We should reduce and not waste. We should reuse, recycle, replant, replace, or whatever. The last idea here is that we already have enough regulations. You'll notice that regulation was not one of the R's I just said, was it? We already have enough regulation. There's no need for drastic measures and government intervention. That's all the green is the new red idea. That's how environmentalism is politicized. We already have enough regulations. Think about it. We already have hunting seasons in place, don't we? That's a conservative way to have wildlife conservation. We don't need to be marching in the streets with Save the Whale signs. We already have hunting seasons and fishing regulations. We already have enough regulations. We already have fines for endangered species, don't we? We don't need any more. We already have forest preserves and other protected habitats, wetlands. Mosquito farms, wetlands. We already have logging regulations. We don't need any more. We don't need drastic government intervention. We have enough government intervention. So that's conservation. Next, responsibility. Remember to treat the environment as if it was God's, because it is. Remember, you are a steward. Treat the environment, treat things like that as if they were your own. Treat them as if you had to pay for them. Okay, be responsible. Remember, use does not equal abuse, does it? Don't take the extreme pathway either. So, conservation, responsibility. We are stewards. Remember, you are a steward. Remember that creation, the environment, is God's, and of course, use does not equal abuse. The last is technology. Technology. Research, not regulation. Research, not regulation, is an appropriate solution as far as industry and manufacturing is concerned. It is true, I said it before, I'll say it again, it is true that industry impacts the environment. So let's employ research, not regulation. I have 3 I's: innovation, incentives, and investments. We need innovations. We need to research how we can do the same thing with less impact. Things that are safer, cheaper, cleaner, faster, and more efficient. Let's develop new technology. That's an innovation. An innovation is new technology. Let's find safer, cheaper, cleaner, faster, more efficient ways to do the same things we already are doing. Let's not stop doing them. Then incentives. Let's give tax incentives to companies that are doing this instead of taxing them. And then investments. Let's invest money into research and development. R&D, it's called. Instead of wasting money on studying environmental impact, let's find better ways to do things. Summary. I've got 4 points here. First of all, a biblical worldview recognizes God's authority, or God's sovereignty, First of all, if we have a proper view of the environment, a proper view of its problems, this is all in summary. First of all, we recognize God's sovereignty. 2 ideas here. This is why we don't worry about saving the environment. We don't worry about saving the environment. Okay? God's sovereign. A verse here is Genesis 8:22. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Remember, God maintains direct control over the environment. The second idea is that the earth will end how and when God decides it will. Okay? God is sustaining the environment. It's not going to end before he wants it to. A good passage here is 2 Peter 3. 2 Peter 3, specifically verse 7. And the heavens and the earth which are now, by the same word are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. Verse 10, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Okay? So it will end how and when God wants it to. And remember, as far as God's sovereignty goes, God created the earth and sustains it. He designed it to be resilient and efficient. Then, second point, so if we have a proper view of the environment, we will recognize God's sovereignty. Secondly, we will, a proper view then requires the stewardship of man. So a proper view recognizes God's sovereignty, and it requires the stewardship of man. Those three things we just talked about: conservation, responsibility, new technology. And third thing, it rejects the politics and tactics of the environmentalist. Okay, so we are going to, the proper view will recognize God's sovereignty, it will require stewardship, it rejects the politics and tactics of the environmentalists. And that's it. I thought I had another page. So 3, if we have that proper view, we know God's sovereign. We're not worried about the earth imploding on itself until God has it, and then we can't do anything about it anyways. We will be stewards, and we'll be aware of what's going on around us with environmentalism. Okay, we'll see you on Monday.